I was lied to. It started with Santa Claus. Like, I was devastated when I found out that everybody was lying to me about Santa Claus, right? And then when I was 12, my dad died of cancer, and my neighbors, my teachers, my whole entire family knew the truth.
Except for you.
You know how I found out? The Bayonne police. Because I was fucking running around buying drugs and running, in my teenage years, and the cops pulled me over and they said something about your dad. It's the same shit with your dad. I was like, whoa, what? He's like, how do you think your father died?
Wow.
Welcome to Hell Has an Exit podcast with host Teddy Tarantino. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. Again, the number you can call for help is 833-999-1877 to speak to an addiction specialist.
Hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host. What's up, dude?
What's up, man?
I got Anthony here. So you're from Jersey, right?
I'm originally from New Jersey, yes.
You've been in Florida, let me guess, 6 years?
Yes. Wow. Good. That's a good memory. Absolutely. Yeah. 6 years and like 3 months now. Yeah.
So what's your story?
Oh, man. Where do I begin, dude? That's a loaded question, man. Obviously, I'm a drug addict. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. If you've been on the show, you got a problem.
Yeah. Exactly. Nah, man, just a Jersey kid. I grew up in a good home, and I started using late in life, dude. Probably I used club drugs and pot and alcohol as a young kid, but that was all like social and party type stuff. But yeah, man, later in life, I really didn't get hooked on opiates until when my mother passed away when I was 24.
Wow.
So like prior to that, like out of high school, I kind of put down the club drugs and everything else, and I just smoked pot. And
what was high school like for you? Were you like popular? Did you have fun in high school? Was it like a good time? Was it a bad time?
Like I would say I was in the popular, not the super popular kids, but I was, the place that I went to school, our city had one high school. So it was like 4,000 kids. You know what I mean? I grew up the city was called Bayonne, New Jersey. So we have like 15 grammar schools or elementary schools. And then everybody goes to this one high school. It's like 3 blocks long, 4,000 kids.
Wow.
So yeah, it was crazy. So it was real easy to get caught up in, the pothead crew or the kids that were doing, fucked up shit.
When did you start working out?
When I got clean.
Really? You were never into working out before?
So out of high school, maybe like a year or so, I was, like I said, I didn't really use heavy drugs. I smoked pot out of high school. I started smoking in high school, and I put down everything else because I'm 43 years old. I don't look it, but back then it was
you look great for your age.
Thank you. Because I work out. And heroin probably preserves you a little bit. But working out. No. So right out of high school, I worked out for maybe a year or two, and then I kind of just like got busy working and with life and everything else. And then at 24, when my mother passed away, it was like everything crumbled.
What about your dad in your life? Was your dad in your life?
So, all right, so I can run through the whole story real quick, and then you can pick and choose questions from there. So my dad died when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
He died from AIDS. So my parents had 5 children total, right? So I have 2 older sisters. The third daughter drowned.
Wow.
When she was 2 years old. That was before me and my brother were born. So to fix their marriage, they had 2 more kids, my brother and I. So of course,
your dad was HIV positive?
Not at that point.
Okay.
So the death of Rebecca drove him over the edge. He blamed my mother. This is all what I've heard through the family members because I wasn't around. But
so your mom was watching her and she fell into the pool?
Dad was at work and my mother was home with the child, and I guess she crawled out of the crib.
Wow.
And got in the pool.
It's always interesting when I ask people on the podcast stories, and they'll do what you did. They'll be like, yeah, my childhood was totally normal. And then like I dig deeper, and then they're like, oh, wait, but also this horrific trauma.
I said I had a pretty good upbringing.
I know. But a lot of people like really gloss over their
100%.
Their trauma.
100%. And I used to come in when I first came in, I said, I didn't really have trauma because I wasn't, sexually or physically or mentally abused.
Yeah.
But losing a parent when you're 12 is traumatic.
Yeah, and even though you didn't know your sister, you still know that has happened, and it's like a dark thing. And I'm sure it must have ruined the energy of like, or people's just mentality and spirit.
Well, my parents' marriage was just gone at that point.
And I'm pretty sure by then, not a lot of people had those pool fences. Even as a kid, we never had a pool fence.
No, of course. Yeah. So that like wrecked their marriage. And I think that's what drove my father to use, because he owned a gas station. He owned a gas station in Jersey City. So he had a lot of young kids that worked for him. And I guess one of the kids was a drug addict or whatever it was, got him hooked up. He started using methadone, I think the story is, first. And then, sharing needles and this and that, and he wound up with AIDS.
Wow. So he became an addict and then got HIV through using.
And when I was maybe 8 or 9, he went to the hospital and had his gallbladder removed. And that's when he was diagnosed with HIV. But we weren't told that, right? So, maybe a year or so later, like I literally...
And your mom never got it?
No. It's crazy. Well, I think because of their marriage was on the rocks. I don't know if they were active. I don't know.
A lot of people don't know, but it's actually hard to get.
It is very right.
Through like just regular sex.
It is.
It has to be like blood to blood.
So miraculously, she did not get it. So he passed away. And you want to talk about traumatic.
So he died from HIV?
Yes. He withered. My dad was big, strong, and he withered away to be 100 pounds.
Before like the meds were out? Because I know now.
Died in 1992.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was like Magic Johnson was diagnosed back then. You know what I mean? So people were still dying left and right. It didn't look good for Magic either, but he had millions of dollars. It's a little different. But yeah, I watched that man, my hero.
Was there any type of like stigma or embarrassment or shame knowing that it was HIV?
So here's the thing. Italian family.
Yeah, because I'm sure they didn't want to tell people that.
The obituary said cancer. The funeral procession, the guy talked vaguely about this horrific disease, alluded to cancer, but he was really talking about whatever. I lived, and this is like the betrayal part, is that, and I figured this all out through step work, right? And like doing some self-work, is that, I was lied to. It started with Santa Claus. Like I was devastated when I found out that everybody was lying to me about Santa Claus, right? And then when I was 12, my dad died of cancer, and my neighbors, my teachers, my whole entire family knew the truth.
Except for you.
You know how I found out? The Bayonne police. Because I was fucking running around buying drugs and in my teenage years. And the cops pulled me over and they said something about your dad. It's the same shit with your dad. I was like, whoa, what? He's like, how do you think your father died?
Wow.
Yeah. So you want to talk about betrayal? You want to talk about
so a cop was like, that's kind of fucked up. That's really fucked up. That's really fucked up for a cop to be like, hey, by the way, your dad got HIV from doing drugs and now you're buying. I thought you said you weren't doing drugs in high school.
I was smoking pot. No, in high school I was smoking pot. We would go to like the corner in the ghetto to buy weed. You know what I mean? But no, we were also doing other things and club drugs and everything else. After high school, I kind of got away from that, and I just went back.
I grew up.
All my friends continued in the bars. They continued cocaine. They continued, doing other things, pills. I literally got a job, had a girlfriend. I got away from all of it for a while.
It's interesting how, and
I was the responsible one.
I believe that people are born addicts, and I do believe that, addiction could be dormant in somebody, just like how other diseases are dormant for a long time, and then, a string of trauma could trigger.
I believe that too.
it to come out. So,
well, a lot of people, there's controversy about the disease model, and some, addicts that are non-addicts.
I don't know why. Because
it's progressive, fatal, and incurable.
Not just that. Google it.
100%. No.
If you Google,
well, they say it's a cop out.
But doctors don't. So whenever someone says, "I don't think addiction isn't a disease," I always say, "Okay, please preface that with saying, I know that 99% of doctors disagree with this, but I believe addiction is not a disease." Because it's true.
Yeah. Well, it's
most people in the medical field, but I think people just aren't educated. Most people in the medical field, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, agree that addiction is a disease. It's in the DSM-6. I think it's the DSM-6 now, is a list of the American Medical Society, whatever, of diseases.
I agree with you.
I know. I just like to be clear because it's because a lot of times people think that it's up for debate. It's not.
Well, a lot of people, you know what, the rebuttal is always that it's a choice.
A choice. So, yeah, so is eating shit and getting
thank you very
diabetes.
much. So if we have a predisposition to be diabetic, it's in my family. If I don't eat like
Mm-hmm.
an animal, right, I'm probably not going to develop the diabetes. Do you understand? So it's the same thing with addiction.
Lifestyle can change the way that a disease forms in your body, but it's also, one individual can try a drug, another individual can try a drug, and it can affect someone the other way. Just like how someone who could be lactose intolerant can't tolerate lactose, and someone who does cocaine one time can become an addict. Like our literature says, it's the reaction that makes us an addict. And a lot of us have this predisposition with every other thing before drugs. Sorry to go off a tangent.
No, it's good. I'm glad we went there. That was cool.
But yeah, addiction is a disease. Point blank.
Period. I agree with you 100%. It's just like diabetes. Some people get it, some people don't.
And it's physical and mental. When I was using, I saw this documentary on addiction. So it's interesting because when I got clean, I Googled, is addiction a disease? And when I got clean, it wasn't in the DSM-5.
Really?
When I got clean, it was still debatable, right? I think years later, a couple years later, it finally became a disease. And it felt really good because when I got clean, I was really unsure of calling it a disease too. And I remember I watched this documentary, right? And they had this guy who was a crackhead and he, been smoking crack for years. And they would flash images in front of his eyes that were so fast he didn't even know what they were. If you watched it, it's so fast you can't even see that it's even flashing.
Yeah.
And they would flash pictures of all sorts of things, and they would throw in little images of crack pipes, and he can't, your eyes can't even pick this up. So on a conscious level, you can't even pick it up. And when the crack pipes would flash, they had these brain scans, and his whole brain would light up and go crazy. And they were like, holy shit.
But did he consciously know what it was? Or
No.
It was just subconscious. Wow.
No, he's just watching this thing, and it's flashing, but it's going so fast you can't even tell that it's flashing. So consciously, he doesn't even know what he's looking at.
Right.
And it's pictures of like butterflies and animals or whatever, and then like they'll throw in like a crack pipe.
I wonder if his guts started bubbling.
Maybe, but also like that's true. It's like we have a physiological thing that happens even before we use
100%.
That happens to us even when we think about drugs.
Well, listen, I think we agree a lot in a lot of things, and the one aspect of it is that when I found drugs, and I'm sure you can relate, it was just so comforting. It wasn't really a matter of getting high. It was just a matter of escaping reality.
I believe most people are using to try to feel like they think everyone else is feeling. So we're almost using it in the beginning to feel normal like everyone else. That's what we think. We have this feeling of like we don't feel like other people.
Outgoing, talkative,
charming, whatever, I think like the root of it is fitting in. Is like
sure. Well, that's how it started for me, 100%, 1,000%.
So are you a victim of like a pain injury, or you just sought out painkillers?
No. So like I said, my dad died when I was 12, and then I didn't really.
You must have been close to your dad at 12, though.
I mean, listen. I don't care. Kids that get beat by their parents love their parents.
Yeah.
My dad was my hero. He had a business. He worked on cars. He was, he could fix and do anything. He was my hero. And I think you ask any 12-year-old kid, if their father's somewhat in their lives, they'll say the same thing. He took us all the time. We would go do things. We went to Disneyland as a kid. Like he was pretty as active as he was capable of being. He never put his hands on me or my brothers or my sisters. He was physically, my grandfather would beat all the kids, you know what I mean? But my dad never did that, but he could literally like give you a look and like your spine would move.
My dad's the same way.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But I know him pretty well. I hated, I turned my back on God for a long time after that. I definitely fell into the victim mentality. I rebelled. I was in a Catholic grammar school at the time. Within a couple months, I was kicked out. Went to a public school. I was the new kid at 12 years old, man. You're asking for trouble. So I got to a lot of fist fights. I had to prove myself. I got kicked out of that school. I got left back.
You got held back, grade? I always thought kids who got held back was like, it must be really fucked up because when you get held back, it's pretty humiliating for that kid.
It really is, yeah. No,
and it's like,
it's
as a kid, 1 year is so long.
I know.
It's like your whole life, you know? So when someone has to repeat the same grade and everyone else goes ahead of them, I always thought that was crazy that they did
So
that.
in the 6th grade, so and my story is I never really did homework or study, but I always did well.
Okay.
Right. So I was a pretty intelligent kid. So the situation when my dad passes away, I go to this school, I start acting out. I didn't give a shit about anything. I was on a rampage, and they came in, the school board came in to do testing on me because they wanted to, put me into the special education system. I don't know if you guys had that here in Florida. So
we had testing, but I don't know.
So we have a special education. So in every school, right, they'll have each grade, 1 or 2 grades, 2 teachers per grade, whatever it is, depending on the amount of students. But for each grade, there's a special education group of kids. So it's usually kids that are, challenged, mentally or educationally or whatever it is. So they'll put them in a system. And I'm so against this, they put me they'll take a kid that's not doing well or not keeping up with the other class, and they'll put them in a special education room where they go slower.
Yeah.
They typically put them in the basement in the corner. So every other kid in the school, even at lunch, cafeteria, those are the kids, you know what I mean? And it's like, it instills this feeling of you're less than.
Yeah, no, for sure. We had it in middle school, and I remember we would make jokes like those kids ate crayons.
100%.
And there was some kids, there was kids in there who were pretty regular, and then there was some kids in there that had severe
mental issues, that, right? Or just some people are just challenged with learning disabilities, But they want to medicate people. Even back then, they were giving kids Ritalin, which is basically crystal methamphetamine, which I don't know how that's supposed to work, but no. So they put me. I got left back in the 6th grade, and then I got left back again in the 6th grade. So for 2 years straight.
What were you doing in 6th grade?
Nothing. I was fighting, being an asshole, and smoking Newports.
You weren't smoking. You were smoking Newports in 6th grade?
My hand to God. I smoked for 30 years. I just quit 2 years ago. Yeah.
It's so crazy you come in here saying, my childhood was normal. Your dad died. You got held back twice. You're smoking Newports when you're 12.
So now going into my 3rd year, I should be in the 8th grade, right? Because 6, 7, 8, right? So I got left back twice. So before they put me in 6th grade for the 3rd time, they tested me. And they labeled me as emotionally disturbed.
Wow. And they told you this?
They told me they said, you're super intelligent. I was reading, and my math and my reading comprehension was at a 12th grade level, and they were like, he's just, I was intelligent. I had, wit about me, but I just was on a rant. I was just a maniac. I was angry. I was blaming the world. I was a victim, and that carried on. So from there, they put me in the 8th grade, where they put me in that special class. I did one special class in 8th grade for the whole year, and then I went to high school as a regular student without the special education, regular student freshman year.
Yeah.
After missing literally 3 years of real education.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you must have been older than everybody, in your class, right?
Well, no, only the 2nd year, 6th grade, I was a year older. But after that, I was an 8th grade regular age.
Okay.
And then freshman year regular age. Yeah. And then it took me 5 years to go through high school. And then from there, I had a girlfriend. I had a job. I stopped with the club drugs. We used to party in Manhattan, and I was selling ecstasy and all sorts of crap at the time. And it was a lot of fun. But it just stopped being fun, man. And then I just like I said, my friends continued with other drugs and hanging out in the bars. And I had a girlfriend that I was madly in love with, and I just worked, and we were together, and that was it, And then a couple of years later, we broke. My mother died, and then I broke up with her maybe 6 months or a year later after that. Yeah.
And then how did the opiates start?
So, like I said, I don't want to. Well, my brother passed away, but when all throughout high school, and he was just always
using,
way worse than me with everything. He found pot, and then he obsessed over that. I did too, but not as bad. And then a couple of my other friends, and they were doing cocaine and doing all this crazy shit. And I was just I don't want nothing to do with that, because I'm still terrified. Back in the 80s, it was we had the DARE program. We had all my family members were use a condom, you're going to get AIDS, and don't use drugs or you're going to die. Stay away from heroin, stay away from cocaine, So it was drilled into my brain. And I, at that time, I was just so afraid of it. And then when I found out how my father passed away, I was just no, you know what I mean? And I was good. I smoked pot. And then when my mother passed away, my brother was in the house using and taking her pills. He was getting pills at this time, doing cocaine and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And when she passed away, I don't know if you heard me share about this before, but that was 2004. I was 24 years old. So this
Wow,
is
in 2004 you were 24?
I'm old as shit, Brian.
No. I'm just thinking. So I'm 2004. I'm 14.
Yeah. You're running, smoking crack in high school, about to get clean in a couple years.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting to see the timeline. So I'm like,
think about it, right?
Yeah,
Where you're at in
2004, I'm 14 smoking crack.
Probably maybe able to hold on at the point, having fun with it, and my life's falling apart.
No, my life was falling apart so early. Seventh grade, it was seventh
14
grade.
smoking crack. Dude. Oh my God.
I think like seventh grade was like the last year of it being fun, and I think eighth grade was me lying that it was like something I wanted to do, and then I think like ninth grade it was like very clear that it was against my will.
Have you recently like looked at a 14-year-old?
Oh, it's insane. I have friends that have kids that are 14, 13, and they're like, "Excuse me, sir, can we use your bathroom?" They're like, "Can I go in your fridge and grab a water?" You know, they're like just sweet kids, you know?
I look at 10-year-olds and I'm like, I was smoking cigarettes at that age.
Yeah.
And they're like this big. You know?
Yeah, it's and I'm sure that there's kids that are out there now that are really mature, because I've met some people that, you know, are really mature for their age, and
yeah.
I just think that I was just always like that. Like even in third grade, like if you look at, I could tell you, I have family photos and you can see the year where I stopped smiling in pictures.
Yeah.
So I remember like first grade, I'm still smiling. Second grade, I'm still smiling. Third grade, I'm still smiling. Fourth grade, I figure out like it's not cool to smile.
Yeah.
And all my pictures from fourth grade to like I got clean, they're all like stone faced. Like
Yeah.
And then it's like I'm looking at pictures of me in fifth grade and I think I'm like Pablo Escobar.
What happened with you though? That you didn't have like a major loss or trauma, did you? I mean,
I believe that we kind of traumatize ourselves. So like for somebody getting picked on in school, they might just say like whatever, and like they don't think about it anymore. And somebody getting picked on in school, they think about it over
for the rest of their life,
and they keep thinking about like, dude, like there's people who they'll sing a song when they're in second grade and everyone laughs at them and they'll never sing in public ever again.
No, I agree with
There's
that.
some people who sing in public and everyone laughs at them and they don't care and they just keep singing. I believe that we're geared to like pick up trauma. There's soldiers that go to war that get traumatized and they didn't even see half the shit that the guy next to them saw as totally
That's
normal.
fine. Right.
So we don't necessarily have to. And dude, I have a friend who was molested when he was little, and he was like, I don't even think that bothered me. I think like my girl breaking up with me 5 years later was way worse than that. Like that didn't even. So like what affects us as children doesn't necessarily have to be textbook trauma. But for me, it was that like I know what happened to me. So like for me, like I had my identity with like skating, and I was good at skating, and I had like skater friends, and all of my friends before third grade and under, like we were all equals, and I had older friends and I was cool because I was younger and whatever. And then when I moved, everybody like played sports, and like dude, till today, like I hate sports. I can't catch a football, can't hit a baseball, can't shoot a basketball, like struck out in t-ball. Like my dad made fun of me because like I suck so bad. Like all my friends made fun of me at the time. There was kids in the neighborhood who would pick on me because I sucked, and like I would cry, and like that's what it was. And then like someone new moved into a neighborhood who like smoked cigarettes and weed, and me and him started hanging out, and now I had like this thing. And I think that even before drugs, like with cookies, like I remember eating cookies and like being so obsessed about it, and like I would wait until everyone left so I could eat them all by myself, because I knew if I ate one I would want to keep eating more. So even in like second and third grade, I would be like, don't eat a cookie now because you're going to want to eat all of them, and then it's going to be torturous.
Yeah.
So wait until your mom leaves and then eat them all. And I remember being like, I'm going to have one cookie, and then I would have two, and then I'd be like, okay, let me just have a third one. And they're like, well, I can't stop on an odd number. I got to have four. And then I would get a bowl, and I'd break them all up and put them in a bowl, and then I'd start eating them out of the bowl with like a whole bunch of milk. Then I would take them upstairs and then be like, fuck it, I'm just gonna kill the whole box. Then I would fucking have this empty box of this brand, they were from Costco, like the big chunk cookies. There's like probably 20 cookies in there. And I remember like, this is how I learned how to do this, where you take the top of the trash up and you put it in the bottom of the trash. And then like my mom would come home and be like, where are the cookies going? I'm like, I don't know. And that's when I learned how to lie. Like that's my first time looking someone dead in the face and lying, you know, and like being totally dead set, like I don't know where the cookies are, and then being like shameful that I ate all the cookies. So
disease of addiction.
I'm definitely like like didn't fit in, picked on, chubby, like not athletic, didn't have an identity. And I think like the hardest thing getting clean is like creating a new identity, because your identity is so locked into using.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I started to realize that like I did have some abuse and I did have some trauma. I was talking to my friends about this the other day. I think I had 5 years clean. I was listening to the Beeves. You know the Beeves?
Justin Bieber.
No.
No.
You don't know the Beeves?
No.
Beaver, the speaker?
No.
You don't know Beaver?
No.
Oh man, legendary recovery speaker,
Oh,
12-step speaker.
okay.
I gotta send it to you.
All right, yeah.
So I was listening to the Beeves, and I had 5 years clean, and he was saying, you know, he's like, you don't gotta be touched to be molested. And I was like, what was he talking about? So he's like, you don't gotta be touched to be molested. He kept saying that, and then he said that he had this babysitter who would basically bathe in front of him naked, and like wanted him to be in the room, and she would never touch him, but she would like, it was inappropriate.
Yeah.
He talked about how that bothered him, and I started to realize I've had a whole bunch of situations like that where like introduced to pornography probably second grade.
Wow.
I was telling someone this. You remember the Faces of Death videos?
Yes.
This is, my friends are like, this is why you're fucked up. When I was probably in third grade, I watched every single Faces of Death video. There's like three volumes.
Yeah.
With my cousin. That would make adults not want to watch and squeamish.
Yeah.
You know, it's literally like an hour long of
just people dying.
And I remember
Brutally, right.
Yeah, brutally. Like you have like, you know, shark attacks, you have rapes, you
Torture,
have torture, you have people's heads getting blown off, chainsaws falling on people, like things that aren't even allowed on the internet. And I remember being in third grade and I watched all of them. I remember like being squeamish, but I didn't want to be a pussy.
Yeah.
So I remember like pretending that I thought it was cool. I came into the rooms thinking like, oh, my childhood was great, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just the tip of the iceberg, you know? But I don't think anybody survives childhood without being traumatized.
In one way or another.
In one way or another. I think some people learn how to deal with it and some people don't. And I think that through drugs, we don't grow up. So we use drugs and replacing all the other coping skills we're supposed to learn.
For sure. And I agree with you 100% on
And even people who aren't addicts, like, dude, if you're not an addict and like you haven't been to therapy, like you need to go, you know, like.
Right.
There are plenty of people who have unresolved childhood trauma that don't have symptoms, right? Like that's
and have no idea that they're toxic.
No idea that they're toxic, that this is why they keep dating a fucked up person. This is why their finances are fucked up. Like, I truly believe like inner child work is the root to any type of.
And that's the thing, is like, how lucky are we, right? That we were brought so low to the point where we were faced to the idea of like, we have to do something about ourselves to get better.
Bro,
and we're given these tools.
I was reading the 4 Agreements and had 2 years clean when I was 19.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I was 19 doing yoga and like understanding like, you know, how the spiritual, you know, how your spirit connects with your brain and like how important self-talk is. Yep. And like some people don't learn this till they're like 40 or never learn it.
Yep.
So a lot of people ask me like, you know, like what got you clean? And honestly, like I started to get more interested in recovery and spirituality. It was more interesting than doing drugs because like fucking your life up, yeah, that's fun and cool for a while, but like nothing's better than building your life up.
Well, I think I heard you share about this before too, and I identified with it as like active addiction was so, it started off as comforting.
Yeah.
And then it just, towards the end, it became so like, it went from the solution to the problem. And then the isolation, even surrounded by people and family and everybody else, it's so lonely in that spot and desperate and painful and dark. So then when I don't know about you, but when I first went to a 12-step meeting or saw a presentation or like, I was all in, man. I saw that. I was like, I want it because I had tried everything to stop using.
Yeah, I think you and I are the same where we both became super gung-ho and
loved
like
it
from the beginning. So like once I went to meetings, it like clicked, it made sense. And I'm such a weirdo, like such a strange person, that being with all these other strange people was like
comforting.
I was like, oh my God, like I thought I was weird.
Right.
It definitely feels good to be around other people that got it way worse than you and are able to guide you through the process. And once you go to meetings, my ability to create excuses went away.
Yeah.
So like I used to have all these excuses why I couldn't get clean, and then you're hanging out with 100 people every night that got clean, you know? So yeah, I definitely fell in love with the program. And so many people like have to go through so much to get to that point, or never do, because they say, well, they look at all like the things that are wrong with the program.
100%.
Oh, well, they have cliques or they have whatever.
But everywhere, jobs, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
You know,
Every job, every church, every NFT community, crypto, like whatever you want to do, whatever sub community, there's going to be teams, and that's just human nature. People team up. You can't get close to 1,000 people. You can only get close to a certain amount. It's really hard to be friends with everybody. And then people owe you money. Someone's going to screw your girl. Like, that's just life, bro. Like, when you get close to people and you do life with people, that's the risk. That's what makes life life. Like, when someone dies, that's what makes life so important, is that they can die. That's why we do say I love. If I knew you'd live forever, I wouldn't have to say I love you.
Right,
you know,
right.
like if I knew that, you know, we were just going to live forever, we wouldn't even hug or embrace, you know? So the whole point that makes this special is that we each have a shared risk. Like when I date somebody, I take the risk that they can cheat on me. I take the risk that she could leave. Like that risk that we share is like kind of what binds us together. And that's just life.
Yeah.
You know,
And whenever I hear people start, you know, copping a resentment against the rooms or the people within it, I'm just like,
you know what I always do? I always say, like, let's just think about the newcomer. If it's so bad, why don't you just be the good guy that is like the anomaly in the rooms and like be there for the newcomer?
Yeah.
Why don't you live on that fucking?
yeah, no, for sure.
You know.
For sure.
But yeah, I don't like dislike people that like leave the rooms, but I really love the people that stay.
So do I. And another thing is, even if I don't like somebody,
If
right?
if
they love NA, like I respect that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Even if I don't like somebody, if I see that they are chipping in and a part of it, it's kind of like we're all like bringing logs from one side of one side of the grass to the other. Yeah. Even if I don't like you, but I saw you help out, I was like, all right, bro, like respect. Cause like we're like, I got to do this too. And like by you doing that, that helps the whole mission.
And, you know, we talk about the family mentality, you know, we're a family, we're a family.
Of course.
But in families, I got cousins I hate. like
it's true.
Not personally, I'm saying that.
And like,
you know.
there's this girl that I do not like, there's probably 4 people in the rooms that I probably don't like. And when I mean don't like if I saw them, I probably wouldn't say hi to them. I like walk past them, not like fight. And there was this girl, she dated like one of my friends, and there was like some drama with her, and I sided with him, and she like blocked me, and like we're not cool anymore. She started using, and
that changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, well,
because I've had people that did me dirty,
and when they start using,
they came back, you know, because I went to a relapse, and somebody that did that really had my name in their mouth in places that it shouldn't have been. I saw the text messages, you know, because I always see the text messages.
Yeah.
You know, the recovery has given me this idea of like empathy and forgiveness. I just knew the pain that this kid was in. I've been there. I was just there recently.
So the thing that brings us so close is that if I think you're my enemy, once you start using it, I realize that there's another enemy that we both don't like. So as even the most racist person in the world, let's say they hate black people, super racist KKK guy, right?
Yeah.
If aliens came down and started killing people, we're brothers. You know what I mean? Like I don't care. When something comes to invade and kill, like that's when we're gonna realize that we're on the same team. It's only like an illusion that we're different because there isn't this other thing. But like addiction is that thing that like we might think we have beef, but like this addiction is like such a bigger beef that we need to be cool, even for a little bit, to handle this, and then we'll figure out like our differences later.
That's why it's so hard to understand the people that really prevent themselves from recovering because of the people within, and it's just like don't even understand.
I think it's just the disease making isolation feel attractive, and I think that the more you get to know people, the more work you have to do because people in recovery are constantly like pushing each other to do stuff, and I think a lot of people get clean, they make this life, they work some steps or whatever, then they get a sponsor. But your sponsor is constantly going to ask you where your step work is. So
a good sponsor.
A good sponsor, right? So then you're like, well, I don't really want a sponsor because I don't want to do the work, but I like the guy.
Yeah.
So then they're like, but it just doesn't make sense. So I dropped my sponsor. Now I'm on my recovery friends and they're all asking me if I have a sponsor. So now I feel stupid because I don't have a sponsor. And like sometimes we do this. We push people away by saying, where's your sponsor? How come you don't have? And like I do this. I'm like crazy, you know? I'm like really like, bro, if you don't have a sponsor, like, you know, I could be, sometimes my encouragement could kind of push people away. And it's something that I think I need to like take a look at sometimes. But
I'm guilty of that also.
Yeah,
the passion just makes me say things.
I want someone to do the steps, but if you keep pushing people to do the steps, maybe they won't do them. But at the same time, like I've never been to a funeral and been like, oh, I wish I didn't push that guy to do the steps. Like, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, I learned, I'm very mindful of that now to not judge people in their recovery and give them their space, but at the same time, not sugarcoat it or
because it's a fine line. And you know what? It depends how close. If I really love you, I'm gonna push the shit out of you. If you're really close to me,
for sure,
I'm gonna be like, dude, come over to my house next Friday and like we're doing step work together.
And if you're not that close with them, like for me, if I'm not that close with them, I hope that someone is close to them to tell them that.
And if I'm not that close to them, I come from the other side of like, you're missing out.
Yeah.
Not that like I'm cool and you're not cool, but I come from like the side of like, man, there's so much that you could be getting from this that you already did all the heavy lifting. Like it's time to like enjoy because really like to me, that's the way I see it is like getting clean is the heavy, dirty, disgusting, difficult part. And working the steps is like the water at the end of the desert. You know what I mean? It's like, this is like the best part.
Yeah.
You know, you're just going to
it's scary.
Walk around thirsty. It's scary, but it's like, dude, I've read all the self-help books. I've done Tony Robbins. I've probably spent like 50 grand in therapy. There ain't nothing compared to the 12 steps, you know, and I'll die on that.
And I love that you say that.
That's like the goal of the podcast is that someone listens to this and like goes and does their step work. But what I was saying with this girl, me and this girl aren't cool anymore, whatever. And I was in a group chat and I had found out that she got arrested and she looked like horrible in her mugshot. And I sent it to somebody one-on-one and I was like, and I wasn't doing it in a gossipy way. I was kind of doing it as like, wow, this is fucking horrible. And he put it in the group chat and he's not like that close to her. And I started to feel like defensive because I was like, these people in the group chat don't even know her. And like, I feel like you did it in a gossiping way. And I was kind of getting like in my head about it. And like, and maybe he wasn't, you know, or maybe he thought like I wasn't that close to her. And like, even though I don't like her, to me, it's still like brother and sister, that's still someone that's in the family. I don't want to see anybody go back to use and fuck their life up. And that's when I realized we can love people and not like them.
Yeah.
In recovery, like we have a lot of relationships like that. There are people that I don't even not like. I'm just not that close to them. And when they die, I cry.
Really?
Yeah, bro. There are people in the rooms that I've probably had 15 conversations with them, but they're just so friendly. And like we might not hang out all the time, but like I just love seeing them.
Yeah,
and like you and you know their whole life story and you watch them on social media and you see when they fucking went from the bus to the car and like you cheer them on, you know? And like I might have never even told this person that I'm fond of them.
Right.
And bro, they'll die of an overdose and it will fucking fuck me up.
Really?
And I'm not even, bro, probably don't even have their number.
And the reason I'm surprised about that is because, you know, in the recovery, you know, lifestyle is you know, a lot of people come in, they don't do what they're told. We meet a lot of people that just don't put in the work and a lot of people die. So I'm so numb. Like, and I've dealt with a lot of death. My father, my mother, my brother, my grandparents, my cousins. So coming into NA, it's like, it's upsetting. You know, but it makes me like question my own integrity and morals because like, why am I not this upset? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I've definitely dealt through that. You know, I did step 7. It talks about like many of us believed we were sociopaths. Like I really thought I was, you know, even at a young age, like I just didn't feel much, you know? Yeah. I think as I got clean, I just started to open up more. I think that there has been deaths that it's weird because we've had so many people die that there are deaths that I really was close to these people. Yeah. And I would try to cry and I couldn't cry for a year, 2 years. And there are people that I wasn't that close with. I would hear the news and cry like instantly.
Yeah.
So I think like when it's more impactful, your body kind of represses it. And I think that when it's kind of suspectful, like I think when I know that it can happen, it kind of hurts less in the beginning, but when I don't expect it, I think that's when like it really hits me.
Yeah. So is it almost because you feel like they're out of their misery or their suffering is over?
It's not
That's
that.
a big one for me. Is if it's
No, because I always think that, like, I'm the guy that, like, dude, you could be down 500 points in the fourth quarter. I think you're coming back.
yeah.
Like, I really do feel that way. When I see people who have been in and out of treatment 100 times, I'm like, bro, 100 to 1 is going to be it. I don't know. I think that maybe my emotions are just, like, built up, and you kind of are like, you're not, like, waiting for them to die, but it's not, like, a surprise. But I think when they do die, like, you're just able to, like, cry, and not, like, a relief, but you're just like, fuck. Like, I was really hoping that they were going to get it. And I think that when someone's clean a long time and you're not worried about them and they die, for me, it's been, like, a shock, and, like, it's really hard for me to tap into those feelings. But you know what's so interesting is I had, like, a really serious death, and I didn't notice this until my therapist pointed this out. So I was going to therapy, and this is one of the things I wanted to work on in therapy. And I would see my therapist, like, months in a row, and then I would bring it up, and he would say, yeah, I've been waiting for you to bring it up. And he would say, like, oh, let's talk about it next week. And then I wouldn't see him for, like, 6 months. And then I would go see him again, and then, like, when
Purposely you would avoid him for 6 months?
I was unaware that this was happening.
Okay.
So this just happened, like, a couple months ago. I would talk about everything else, but when it would get to this subject, I would stop seeing him and say that I was busy, and not know that it was probably subconscious. And it wasn't until last time that I realized that he pointed out, like, I think that whenever we get around this topic, you don't want to talk about this. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I'll talk about it. I don't care. And then I stopped seeing him, and then, like, and now I'm like, wow, I just did it again.
Yes.
So I definitely need to work on that, because it's probably, like, the most traumatic, fucked up thing that's happened.
And I think we're really good at, I know for me, like, I'm really good at avoiding things.
And no one brings it up. So
What do you mean? Nobody brings what up?
like, your mom died,
Yeah.
and it was probably the most traumatic thing. Probably no one brings that up to you.
I hear about it often. It's not here because nobody knows me or my family, but everybody, my parents, my family members, my sisters, you know, my friends, because my house, everybody knew my mother, you know, so people bring it up pretty regularly. You know,
That's interesting.
But you're right. When my dad died, it was super traumatic, super traumatic. My mom died, super traumatic, turned into a drug addict. I started using opiates. We never even got into that story, but I started using opiates after the fact because her pain medicine was in the house. And when I took it, it helped me deal with I wasn't suffering. I wasn't mourning. I didn't have grief. I didn't have anxiety. I didn't have depression. Like, I took a half a blue and I was good. I could work like a robot.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the death of my mother. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was, like, in the solution. So that's how that opened up. But that was just, and I never dealt with that until I got clean.
Wow.
So for 10 years in active addiction, I got clean and I get on a 4th step, right? It was really when I got on an 8th step. We're actually 8 and 9. And with my sponsor, we go over 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We do them together, right? So I do 4. He says, finish 5, we'll go over it. I do 6, right on 7, we'll go over it. Same thing with 8 and 9. So I'm going over my 8 and 9 step, and I got to the harm that I caused my mother, right? And I had to look at the things that I did as a child, pre-active addiction, how controlling and possessive I was over her when she was sick, because she died in the house. I was so possessive over, like, protective over her, that I pushed her best friend out of her life. Because her best friend was using and whatever. She was a pillhead. My mother was not a drug addict at all, but her friend was like a pillhead. And I caught her friend stealing money from her purse. My mother always kept money in her purse. And instead of letting it go and pulling her to the side and saying, listen, or protecting the money, I made a big scene out of it. And my mother had to know. Like, my mother knew that her best friend stabbed her in the back before she died while she was sick. So there was a lot of betrayal that I caused my mother. When all I had to do was just handle it differently.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
You're also young.
Yeah. And I know, like, through step work, right?
Yeah.
I know that my intentions were good.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't take a fact away from the harm that I did.
There's a lot of stuff that I had a lot of shame and guilt about. And when I did step work with my sponsor, he could see that I, like, was just, like, fucked up about this.
Devastated over
And my
it.
sponsor would be like, dude, you're 12.
Right. Yeah. My sponsor said the same thing.
And it wasn't until he said that I got a relief.
That it clicked,
It like instant, like, I don't feel like that. Bro, there was stuff that I had done when I was, like, in 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 5th grade that I thought was like so fucked. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I do this? And like all this shit. And like I would read it to my sponsor, and he'd be like, "Dude, you were fucking second grade."
And that's the power, right? Like people don't realize 12 steps. You know, like the power is like, why am I going to revisit these things? You don't even realize that they're traumatizing you, number one, right? But you write it because you're instructed to write it because you just want to stop using and you want the pain to stop. And then you get this guy, right? Like I'm like, my sponsor, and he, he was very loving, and he's like a family member. It just reminds me of one of my old family members from back up north, And he said, "Listen, kid, it's what you did. It's not who you are." And I say this to everybody that struggles with guilt and shame from active addiction. I tell them it's what you did. It's not who you were. You got a hall pass because you were using or you were young, and like the fact that it's years later and you still feel guilty about it means only one thing: that you're a decent human being.
Yeah.
If you didn't care, then it'd be a problem.
Yeah.
So having somebody tell me these things, and 4 and 5 was scary. 6 and 7 was painful because I'm looking at my defects, but 8 and 9 was the most emotional. I had to look through, the harm and really admit some things that I did to the people that I literally had a resentment against that I swore did me so dirty and like they could die because they deserve what I did to them. And I had to look at my part. And it was the whole process is just so eye-opening and healing
and the thing is that you can ask someone like, does anything in your childhood bother you? And they would say no.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me, like, did anything happen to you when you were, I'd be like, no. You're like,
yeah.
If anything, I just felt like a piece of shit for being a drug addict. I thought, like, but the longer I stay clean, the more I see, like, 14-year-olds don't smoke crack for no reason.
It took you a long time to figure that out.
Dude, I remember, because I felt so guilty because I lived in a nice house and my parents taught me right from wrong. And, like, my mom loved me and, like, my dad said he loved me. And, like, you have guilt and shame about saying your parents are fucked up when they took you to Disney World and there was food on the table and your dad bought you clothes. And so what? He yelled at you a couple times. Like, you also don't want to create a victim. And I'm also thinking, like, dude, there's people who have real trauma.
Comparison.
So I don't want to say I have trauma when someone else has, like, real trauma. Even the word trauma is so taboo to say because people just assume, like, even, like, if you go to therapy, people are always like, what happened?
Right.
People always assume that if you're in therapy, like, something fucked up must have happened. But the reality is that, like, we have so much things that happen to us as kids that if we don't organize it into like, this was your fault, this wasn't your fault, this was true, this wasn't true, this is, okay, this wasn't okay. You really were a victim here, you weren't a victim here. Or like, your dad really loves you, but he only said that because that's how his dad talked to him. And like little things like that. Like if you go your whole life without doing that, it really creates victim mentality, hatred for people. It's hard to like be loving and kind and even just connecting. It's hard to like even connect with people if you haven't dealt with your own
and
stuff.
Dealing with that, in our literature it says like it's to sort through the confusion and contradiction of our past, right? Because our insanity tells us that things are just way out of proportion.
Or it's like, or we put things in black and white. I really believe like there's no such thing as a good person or a bad person. I feel like people are way more complex than that.
Yeah.
And I do think that in our minds to organize it, we'll put things in like
one or the other.
This was a horrible experience. I was watching this video with Tony Robbins, and this lady was like, how do I get over this? My dad never hugged me. And he's like, did he really never hug you? She was like, yeah. And he's like, did he really never hug you? She's like, he never hugged me. He never said I love you. And he's like, but did he really? Like, is this true? He never. And she was like, well, I think he would hug me sometime or whatever. And he's like, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That, like, I used to do this with my father. I would say like, oh, my dad hated me. My dad would scream and yell and say fucked up shit to me all the time. But he also did a whole bunch of nice shit that I would never include that. I would only be like, oh, he fucking punched a wall and called me a piece of shit, or something like that.
Focus on the negative.
Yeah, and like the reality is that we do that because it helps our story. That we're addicted to that story of like, my dad is this way. Even if we lie to ourselves and paint it another way, it would get us to where we need to go, as opposed to just holding on to the story that we keep telling ourselves.
Well, it allows us to be the victim and,
of course.
And justify, right? It's not my fault. This happened to me. This happened
He's
to me.
like this or whatever. You know what helps me a lot with my parents in the 4 agreements where it says like, I can't blame someone for not teaching me what they were never taught.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think about the way my dad grew up and like, dude, my dad was 10 times the man that his father was, and like, I can only expect so much as like, time goes on for myself.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can't really blame someone who didn't have the tools in the first place.
Yeah. But that's confusing as a kid. You know, that's,
when you're a kid,
you don't get any of that.
You're looking across the street. Your friends have the perfect life. You don't see what goes on behind closed doors. But even as an adult, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty about looking at things from a different perspective. Because and it's only because of working a program. And like I said before, how lucky are we that I went through the misery of active addiction to get to this enlightening state of life? It's like, the gratitude that we have for life, number one. The other one is just the perspective of like ourselves, the real vision of who we are, who we're supposed to be. And it doesn't just happen because you get clean. But putting in the work, it's like we're just so better equipped, right? To like just look at ourselves and look at the reality of.
I remember going to meetings and like I really do believe people were glowing.
Yeah.
And even like when I would go to church as a kid, it felt nothing like what it was like going to the rooms. You would go to the rooms and there would be like an old man, 60 years old, grateful to be alive. Like he was just like on fire.
Yeah.
And like,
and it's so attractive
and
when you're broken.
Yeah, you're just what? How could I have that? And like you have people in there just like they have 30 years clean. They're like, I'm just grateful I'm not in jail,
Right.
And I used to think of that as like, wow, that's your standard of life. You're just grateful. Like that
is
like,
a slippery slope.
Because I didn't understand it. Because I remember being like, wow, like don't you want to get over this or whatever?
Yeah.
And I realized that I have a book that I wrote that's basically like.
You wrote a book.
It's not out yet. But I have like a Hell Has an Exit book.
Coming soon,
which is basically like what I believe are like a list of topics that people deal with getting clean.
Okay.
So basically like getting clean for dummies type of book that is just to like my personal experience and what I think people struggle with, like the God thing, people, places, and things, dealing with family, jobs, women, love, intimacy, stuff like that. When I first got clean, and like a lot of people say this, you ask them what they want, people say, I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
And like my whole life, I chased this happiness. Like that's why I was on drugs, because I just wanted to feel happy all the time.
Yeah.
And I really think that the only thing that we could really have is like gratitude, because I think like being happy all the time is like unrealistic. Like when someone calls you and say like your friend died, you shouldn't be happy, but you could be grateful that you did have like the memories that they have. So I think like gratitude is a real life, tangible, adult, responsible state of being that you could be at all times. I think trying to be happy all the time is childish, immature, and irresponsible.
Well, I think happiness is fleeting. A new pair of sneakers will make me happy.
Yeah, exactly.
A new girl will make me happy. A new car. But joy, right, which can't be
come
taken
from the
away,
inside,
comes from gratitude. And gratitude is something, I was talking about somebody about this recently, like, we have, I'm sure you can identify, I'm sure if we both really sat here and thought about active addiction and our mindset, right? Like I could cry right now thinking about my life the way it is today. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you, the fact that I'm not 130 pounds, the fact that I have some money in my pocket, I have a car outside. Like there's so many things to be grateful for. And I can literally get my point to the point where I'm like literally in tears thinking gratitude. But it's not always the case. Like I have to focus on that. So, I've found things in recovery, in getting clean, just from trying different things. I tried a lot of different things, that I didn't like. But there are certain things that I love, that I'm passionate about. You have some things that you're passionate about too. So like, recently I had the blessing to be able to go, I found out during COVID that I love hiking.
Wow, you're a hiker?
Dude, it's
in
weird.
Florida?
It's weird.
In Florida?
No.
Okay.
So during COVID, trips to Vegas were like $40. And my friend John was in town. He's like, let's go to Vegas. And we went and everything was shut down. So we got in the rental car and we just drove up to South Dakota.
Wow.
And so,
hiked?
Well, not with him.
Okay.
He's a big guy.
Yeah.
But we saw Mount Rushmore, we saw beautiful landscapes and all that. And he had to go home and Shane came out and finished the trip with me. So for 2 days, we did some hikes. 2 weeks later, we went back and did some more hiking.
I would never expect that from you. It's interesting.
Bro, when you look down at the Grand Canyon, right? And mind you, and this goes back to the gratitude of active addiction. I don't know, you weren't as you were a little bit younger, but I don't know if you went on family vacations, but you got to make sure you have enough to make it through.
Yeah.
That just wasn't the case. I have the freedom to do what I want today and go and do amazing, beautiful things that I used to think were really corny. But when I went up to the rim of the Grand Canyon, right? And I can't believe I'm saying this, it's so corny. But dude, if you don't believe in God, man, you're just not paying attention, right? I struggle with God. I came in without a God, and the 12-step program has brought me like eyes wide open to that, So, and I just went on a trip to California with a friend of mine, and we did Yosemite and hiked. I don't know if you saw on my social media, but like, oh my God, dude. And the reason I say that, I'm on the beach pretty regularly too, right? So, I grew up in New Jersey, and going to the beach was like, you did it on the weekend.
Yeah.
It was a 2-hour drive to get there. It was mobbed.
I've seen the Jersey Shore.
It's terrible. But there's blankets everywhere. You can't even get a piece of beach. You got to pay to get on it. I love my people in New Jersey. I'm sorry, but Florida's amazing. Right? So I take advantage of that. You guys don't. I was talking to somebody about this recently. You guys probably never go to the beach because you were born and raised down here.
So some people love the beach and some people don't, whether you're from here or not.
This is true.
I don't like sitting at the beach. I like running on the beach.
I saw you the other day, as a matter of fact.
You saw me running?
On A1A.
Really?
You were talking to some dude. I was driving my car, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was taking my bicycle to the state park over there.
Yeah, my buddy was out there. We ran into each other.
Over by like Seabreeze or somewhere over there. But anyway, so when getting back to the gratitude piece, like as addicts, we have the ability to really focus on it, right? But to perpetual gratitude, like every day without even thinking, like when I go to the beach, for some reason, I get in the water, I get on it, like I can't help it. It's the default feeling of
nature. Nature is definitely something that people neglect. That like being in nature is definitely something that is irreplaceable. You can't like put on like the new VR goggles and like replicate. You know, like there is nothing that comes close to being in nature.
But like the minute I get there, it's like I don't have to force it. It's just instant. I swear to God, Bryan.
Yeah, you're like grateful to be alive.
I can cry. I'm like, thank you, God, and I just immediately go into the perspective of where I was and where I am, and like going on hikes is no different.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
When you're a drug addict, because when you're using like something like that, it's not in the cards.
No,
like you're not.
I would look at people jogging and like that guy's out of his mind. Who does that?
Yeah.
I would see people happy and be angry.
Me too.
How dare you? Don't you know how miserable I am?
Yeah.
You know?
I hate it when people spend money on stuff. When I watch someone buy tattoos, I'm in my head like, how many pills you could have bought with that?
Oh my God, yeah.
God, you could have gave me that. Or like someone buy a new phone. Or like, wow, what the, But I have a funny story about the Grand Canyon. So when I was little, we didn't go on a lot of family trips, but like
you brought crack with you.
Hell yeah.
12 years old.
It's hard bringing crack on a plane, but I remember we went. So I was like addicted to opiates at the time. I think I was like trying to get off them, like using the trip to wean off,
Okay.
And I think I was
I've done that. Oh, God.
And like we didn't travel a lot, but I remember like we went to California and we went to see like the Grand Canyon or whatever, like on this trip. And I remember being in the back seat. Me and my dad are arguing like all the time. He's like calling me ungrateful because I don't want to do anything. And I don't want to go to the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, I'm like saying the Grand Canyon is gay. I'm like, I'm not going to the Grand Canyon. It's fucking whack, And we go to the Grand Canyon. I'm in the back seat and I'm like just dope. So everyone gets out to go look at it. I refuse to get out.
Wow.
And my dad's like, you're not going to get out to look at the Grand Canyon. I was like, no, I don't care about the Grand Canyon.
He was right. You're ungrateful.
Bro, my dad was like, what the fuck is the matter with you? Get the fuck out of the car. I was like, dude, I just don't care. And he was just like, get the fuck out of the car. And I remember I got out of the car and like, I think at that time I was smoking cigarettes. And I think my parents would my mom would like take my cigarettes away and try to stop me. But at this point, they're just like,
whatever.
The kid smokes cigarettes. He's fucking 11.
Yeah.
Give it to him. But I was probably like 14, maybe. Yeah, 14 at the time. I remember I like smoked like half a cigarette. I was like 30 feet from the edge. And I just like kind of pretended to look and like went back inside. And my dad was just like, this fucking piece of shit.
Wow, that's a valid response.
Yeah. Now that I think about it.
The man takes you across the country to look at the Grand Canyon. You don't even want to get out of the car.
No.
That's terrible.
No.
Oh, God.
I didn't care about it. I just wanted $20.
Yeah, right. Oh, my God.
But, hey, I think we didn't get into any of your story, but maybe next time we will.
A lot of philosophy in our opinions.
Yeah,
we got that.
It's cool though. So I kind of like that. Honestly, like there's a couple people I've had on the show where we just talk.
Bullshit. Yeah.
But hey, I appreciate you coming.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude, love you. How long you been clean now?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years and 2 months.
We'll have to get into the
2 years back.
2 years back.
Yeah.
Wow.
3 years ago, I used for a couple of weeks, man.
Mm-hmm.
I was devastated.
3 years back, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I was devastated. You remember that?
Yeah.
You were there to help
You
me.
feel different.
I'll never forget that.
Hey,
I'll
thank you.
I'll never forget that.
Thank you. You feel
You're
different the first.
You're so humble.
I don't want to hear it. Yeah. My therapist spots that out with you.
What's that?
My therapist like says that about me. He's like, you don't like to be I was like,
Well, for the record,
Mm-hmm.
you put your hand out and you offered to help me, and I appreciate
Hey,
that.
no problem.
And I'll never forget that.
Thank you.
And Mikey too.
Mikey. Yeah. Let me ask you, was it different the first time and the second time? Do you feel different?
The recovery's totally different.
How?
I think my first time around from 2017 to 2020, I really didn't have any adversities. Listen, I went through the steps. I don't want to say I didn't do them thoroughly, but there was a lot of regression in my recovery because ego and arrogance, and anyone that knows me, and I'll even say it myself, I changed a lot since that relapse. I know I have, just my perspective on things. But yeah, it's very different. I've been through a lot of major things in the past 3 years. And like my perspective, like we were talking about, like the arrogance, the that's all changed, man.
Have you cried in a meeting before?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just haven't seen it.
Really?
Yeah, but I used to always say like this time or the first
I
time?
cried in Carl's home group a couple months ago.
That's cool.
Yeah, because we were talking about like disassociating and it was like my brother had passed away. We didn't get into that either.
Wow.
But it was like a month, and I was just like, I went to the funeral. I came back here, and I was literally in the gym on the beach with a girl. I was just distracting myself, and I woke up for days, a couple days, maybe a month later, and I had anxiety. I had this pit in my stomach. I was crying. I didn't know why, and it was because I wasn't grieving my brother. And I went to Carl's home group.
Yeah.
And I shared about it, and I went hiking the next day in Sedona, Arizona.
That's cool.
And by myself.
Yeah, I always feel like that's like a key factor. Like, I don't know, it's like for me, like I cried so much my first year clean in meetings. Now I think it's crazy because I don't see that many people do it. Because I don't know, like my first year clean, like I grew up thinking like I was really cool. Like in 5th grade, I was the coolest kid on the planet. I just grew up like I would never cry. Like I wouldn't even smile in pictures in 5th grade, And when I got clean, I was so humiliated that I had become what I had become. Like I was like, I was well aware that I was a fucking loser and that crack ruined my life and controlled my life. And so did Roxy's and Oxy's.
What
and
a realization that is.
I was like, how like some people get clean, like they're still like taking selfies and they think they're the shit and they're like in a halfway house. Not to like make fun of them. But I was not like, I knew this wasn't it. Like I was like
that.
Yeah.
You remember 6 years ago? I know. You know what I'm saying? No, you're being nice.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like, but like, dude, when I got clean, I didn't care if people saw, and like, I was also so young. So like the people at the meetings were like people I like never knew. They're not my friends. They're just like older people at the meetings. I would cry all the time. Like I wouldn't even want to. I would just raise my hand and like just ugly cry, snot coming out, like whatever. So, and I honestly think that, well, not that I think, I know that, like being an adult man and having the ability to cry is like a super asset.
It's life-changing.
I
don't think recovery is possible without it, to be honest with you.
I sponsored a guy who's been clean a long time. I don't want to say who it is. And he hasn't cried since he's been clean. He's been clean years.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, he has stuff that's happened to him as a kid and stuff like that. And I remember this one time we were doing step work and like he almost was crying. And I was like trying to get him to cry. And he was just like, he looked at me, he's like, it's not happening. And I was like, why do you have that resistance? It's crazy, To me, like when someone dies and I cry, I feel really good. It's when I can't cry that I feel like what's holding me back, So, anyways, hey, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks again.
Love
man.
you.
Thank you, bro. Absolutely.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. Again, the number you can call for help is 833-999-1877 to speak to an addiction specialist.